Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 361 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about Atlanta Brave outfielder Jared Kelnic not running hard around the bases. Tell me if you've heard this one before. Braves outfielder Jared Kelnic hit a ball that he thought was going to turn into a surefire home run, and it wasn't. He frantically runs to second base where he gets thrown out. You might say this is all to do about nothing, but then Ronald Acuna Jr. tweets and then deletes that if that were him, the manager would have taken him out of the game. And why would the MVP outfielder feel that way? Because that's exactly what Braves manager Brian Snitker did to him back in 2019. And if Ronald Acuna Jr. truly was upset, the response from his manager Brian Snitker probably didn't help things, which wasn't watching that play. I know he got thrown out at second. I didn't see it until this morning. Here's what Snitker said back in 2019 after benching Acuna, quote, "You've got to run. It's not going to be acceptable here. As a teammate, you're responsible for 24 other guys, and that name on the front is a lot more important than the name on the back of that jersey. You can't do that. We're trying to accomplish something special here. Personal things have to be put on the back burner," end quote. Those two differing responses are bound to drive Ronald Acuna Jr. mad, and I have heard so many opinions on this. Some have said that it's a weird double standard, while others have pointed out that Ronald Acuna Jr. is a star, and thus it's more important to hold him to a higher standard than Jared Kelnic, who is just an okay player, and I understand that. But Ronald Acuna Jr. needs to be on board with that, and he clearly is not. If you follow the sport of baseball, you know this is a recurring situation where a lot of the time it ends up with a player being taken out of games. Players in recent years benched for lack of hustle, base running include Gleyber Torres when he was on the Yankees, and outfielder Tyler O'Neill when he was on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here's my take on this situation. I fully understand Ronald Acuna Jr. believing that the Atlanta Braves had a universal standard when it came to running hard around the bases because he was punished for a lack of hustle running the bases. So he thought each and every one of his teammates was going to be held by that same standard, and was clearly angered and frustrated when he learned in real time that that was not the case. That would drive anyone mad. This topic really has become about picking sides, Ronald Acuna Jr. or Brian Snitker, and I'm not really interested in that, although I am leaning more towards Ronald Acuna Jr. I think the more interesting topic is, what does this all mean about the long-term relationship between Ronald Acuna Jr. and the Atlanta Braves? Because the feeling that I'm getting is this is clearly a guy who is maybe growing tired of his long-term manager, and maybe he wants to play for somebody else. In fairness to Brian Snitker, he has had a lot of success with the Atlanta Braves. He's won a World Series, but if the Atlanta Braves do not make the playoffs this year, I would not be surprised whatsoever if they moved on from their long-term manager, because I think it would kind of help repair Ronald Acuna Jr.'s relationship with the franchise. They want to keep this guy around. He's the guy that hit 40 homers and stole 70 bases. He's the star player. It's way more important choosing him long-term than it is Snitker. And look, I'm not calling for anyone's job. I don't know if Ronald Acuna Jr. really does feel a way about his manager, but clearly he was upset about this situation, and I'm just going to keep my eye on the Atlanta Braves and Ronald Acuna Jr. from here on out for the rest of the season. I want to see how the season ends and if Snitker is going to remain the Braves manager for the future, or if they are going to have to choose between their star player and their manager. And look, I think they would choose their star player, and I think that would be the right choice. Here's what former Braves outfielder Jeff Francoeur had to say about the situation, quote, "There are 26 guys in that locker room that are busting their ass every single day, and they are taking crap from, let's be honest, all of us, all of national media, this team's a letdown. They were the second best pick to win the World Series and all of this. And those guys are trying their butts off every single day. You finally get something going in your direction, and you got a guy who's supposed to be your teammate tweeting, probably out in LA, something that is completely meaningless and stupid, end quote. All of that is being said by a guy who played for the Atlanta Braves and is still a broadcaster for the organization. He is the ultimate homer. He is choosing the side of the organization over the player. He is trying to make it look like Ronald Acuna Jr. is being a bad teammate by pointing out the inconsistency of his manager, and I find that to be ridiculous. He is not calling out Jared Kelnic. He didn't call him a lazy base runner. He didn't call him a bad teammate either. He's just saying that his manager is reacting to this situation differently than when he was in the exact same situation, and I think that's fair play. I'm also just not buying the idea that this creates a huge distraction moving forward for the Atlanta Braves. I don't believe Ronald Acuna Jr. has a problem with his teammate Jared Kelnic. I believe he has a problem with Brian Snitker, which was going to become a problem no matter what was going to happen. That's what I believe anyway. Again, I have no idea if that's true. Maybe Ronald Acuna Jr. just got upset in the moment, tweeted something, and then regretted it right away, and we should all move on from it. Maybe we're making way too much of a big deal out of this. What Ronald Acuna Jr. did was very human. He saw in real time somebody doing something that he did in the past and was punished for, not be punished, and he got upset and he tweeted about it. Here's another take from a former member of the Atlanta Braves, MLB Network's Mark DeRosa, quote, "If you've got something to say, walk into the manager's office and talk to him like a grown man. To sit back and use social media knowing it was going to incite a riot, that is my hang up with it." So I understand that take more than I understand what Jeff Francoeur is saying, but my big problem with what DeRosa is saying here is that he's upset that Ronald Acuna Jr. took this publicly. Guess what? Ronald Acuna Jr. was the one who was publicly disciplined back in 2019. The Braves were the ones who made this public when they disciplined the outfielder back in 2019. So he is just doing the exact same thing the Atlanta Braves did to him. They didn't have a quiet conversation with Ronald Acuna Jr. and told him to start running harder. No, they took him out of a baseball game. In the middle of it, a public display of frustration with a young outfielder. And that's what Ronald Acuna Jr. did on Twitter. He had a public display of frustration towards his manager. I view them as equal. Now, if you want to say that both situations back in 2019 and this situation should have been handled backdoors, then that I agree with. But because that situation in 2019 was made public for us all to talk about, to embarrass Ronald Acuna Jr., then yeah, he's going to react publicly because that's what was done to him. It's the exact same situation. Again, plenty of people have chosen sides when it comes to this argument. Maybe these situations should stay in-house. The public display is what creates all the discourse. I mean, we are still talking about former Yankees manager Billy Martin taking Reggie Jackson out of a game for not running hard to a ball. In the outfield, I mean, we obsess over these moments because these guys were star players. Ronald Acuna Jr. is an MVP outfielder. I'm not totally naive. I understand the fact that probably Brian Snitker does not care about disciplining Jared Kelnic. I was a little annoyed when I heard Snitker say that Kelnic usually plays the game with his hair on fire. I think that is an insane thing to say after a guy watches a ball he thinks is a home run not turn into a home run. That is not the time to praise the guy. Overpraising is just as annoying as not punishing a guy. So are the Atlanta Braves going to be able to get over all of this? I don't have the answer to this. I feel good about the short term. I think Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to come back from his injury and have a stellar season, and the Braves are possibly going to be a playoff team. I mean, they still have talent on that roster. Chris Sale, Austin Riley, that team is stacked. But long term is when I start to have my questions. Maybe this will not be the absolute undoing of Brian Snitker, but it will be one of the reasons he's not the long-term answer at manager. And there are unanswered elements in all of this. Like, I actually don't know how Jared Kelnic feels about this situation. Does he feel embarrassed about what Ronald Acuna Jr. tweeted? Does he feel like Ronald Acuna Jr. is a bad teammate? And do the other members of the Atlanta Braves feel similarly? I don't know. I just don't understand how Ronald Acuna Jr. is now being made the villain of this story, when all he is doing is just pointing out clear hypocrisy from his manager. I also don't believe this will be the reason the Braves don't make the postseason. If that's the case, it will come down to talent and the other teams in that division. The Phillies and Mets are both viewed as far better teams than the Braves right now, and the Nationals are viewed as a more exciting team to watch. They are a team on the rise. And this is not the first issue that has happened to the Braves so far this season. I mean, earlier in the year, they lost their free agent acquisition, Jurgensen Profar, to suspension because of performance-enhancing drugs, so they missed out on an outfielder they were going to rely on, and that's probably part of the reason that Jared Kelnic is playing in the first place. The Atlanta Braves are in a weird position where it feels like it's kind of the end of a run. It doesn't feel like the beginning. I don't know how much longer Brian Snitker is going to be the manager. You're still going to want to build around Ronald Acuna Jr., but I think the question is, who is going to be around him long term? Like, I think Michael Harris is a long-term answer in the outfield. I think he's one of the best young players in baseball. I view him as a future all-star type player. They still have Matt Olson at first base, but pitching-wise, I mean, they have the aging Chris Sale. He won the Cy Young last year. He hasn't been nearly as dominant this year. There are questions when it comes to the Braves rotation. Spencer Strider seems to be dealing with injury after injury. You don't know if he's going to be a guy they can rely on long term. And then you got this situation, which may or may not end up being an issue moving forward. I guess what I've learned watching this situation play out is I'm not really a big fan of managers calling out players' effort in the public. Like, I don't think that's the place to do it. And I'm okay that Brian Snitker didn't take Jared Kelnic out of the game, but I would have liked Snitker to publicly acknowledge that this was the exact same situation that occurred with Ronald Acuna Jr. and that he handled things differently. Like, if Snitker had come out and said, well, my feelings on the matter have changed over the years. I've evolved as a manager. During this time, I would have dealt it this way. Now I'm dealing with it this way. I would have respected that. Instead, he couldn't have seemed less interested in the reporters asking him about the situation with Kelnic and Acuna Jr. tweeting about it. He also did the tired old man act of, I'm not on social media. I don't think this is a situation where there's a wrong and there's a right. I believe the answer is that Snitker should have just been more consistent. Look, I punished this guy for poor base running back in 2019. I should do the exact same thing to this guy in 2025 because I want to be consistent, which is all Ronald Acuna Jr. is asking for. This is something that I haven't seen anybody talk about when it comes to this. Obviously, Ronald Acuna Jr. felt embarrassed by his benching back in 2019. It's the reason he hasn't let it go. So yeah, when he sees somebody in the exact same situation get treated differently, yeah, he's going to react some kind of way. It's not that surprising that he reacted this way. It's very human and relatable of Ronald Acuna Jr. to do. He did the least surprising thing of all time. It's Brian Snitker who's trying to backtrack and act like there's nothing to see here. Looking at Ronald Acuna Jr.'s contract situation, he's most likely going to be a member of the Atlanta Braves until at least 2028, and then he will become a free agent. But if he continues to play at an MVP level, Ronald Acuna Jr. could be one of those guys who gets one of these massive deals like Juan Soto or like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It is a ways away, and it's worth noting that Ronald Acuna Jr. will be 31 years old when he's presumably a free agent. I'm just going to keep an eye on what his situation and his relationship with the Atlanta Braves is going to be like moving forward. Because while this may seem small in the moment, if things really start to fall apart and the Atlanta Braves are not a good team, he might continue to voice his frustration with the organization, especially if they've been getting on his nerves for some time now. I really do believe in the long term the Atlanta Braves may be forced to pick sides between their star outfielder and their World Series winning manager, and my belief is they would 1000% pick their star player. They would be insane not to. Again, I would like to point out this is all my opinion. I don't know how Ronald Acuna Jr. actually feels about this situation or about Snitker's response to this situation. All I know is the MVP tweeted that out and the manager responded the way the manager responded. I just think something could be up with the Atlanta Braves in the coming months, especially if they end up being a middling team that misses the postseason. This could end up being the most talked about situation when it comes to the Atlanta Braves this season. The idea that we're all talking about Jared Kelnic, who was once a top prospect with the Seattle Mariners, who did not pan out. Now we're talking about him hitting a ball he thinks is a home run, which isn't. And somehow that all gets connected back to Ronald Acuna Jr. Who knows, maybe there's a slight possibility that this could repair the relationship of Snitker and Ronald Acuna Jr. Maybe they're finally going to have an honest, deep conversation about what exactly went down in 2019. Because clearly, Ronald Acuna Jr. is still bothered by that situation, and how Snitker dealt with Kelnic brought all of those feelings back up to the surface. Either way, this is going to be a situation the Atlanta Braves either get over and become a playoff team, or it will be the end of them, and then we'll start to have those bigger conversations about what's going to happen to the Atlanta Braves moving forward. I do know this. The Atlanta Braves do have one of the best executives in all of baseball, Alex Anthopoulos. So I do kind of feel good about them long term. What I don't know is the future of Brian Snitker or the future of Ronald Acuna Jr. because those do have to be somewhat up in the air because you don't know how these two feel about each other right now. Ronald Acuna Jr. has yet to play a baseball game in 2025, and now all eyes are going to be on him because of this situation, and we will all be seeing how he reacts to being back with Snitker and the Atlanta Braves for the rest of the year. I know what I'm rooting for. I'm rooting to see MVP level of baseball from Ronald Acuna Jr., one of the best players in the game, a guy who again hit 40 home runs and stole 70 bases. If he is that good once again, the Atlanta Braves will be back in the playoff hunt. But I don't know if that will ultimately resolve this situation involving Snitker, Acuna Jr., and Kelnic. Baseball is such a long season that you really won't know the long-term effects of this situation probably until the end of this season. In the coming months, we are going to know more about how Snitker feels about Ronald Acuna Jr. and how Ronald Acuna Jr. feels about Brian Snitker. In closing, this is a situation where you could have many different opinions. One thing is true though. If Snitker were 100% consistent and benched Jared Kelnic after that base running blunder, then this never would have become a situation in the first place, because Ronald Acuna Jr. wouldn't have been upset because he would see his manager being consistent. It is the inconsistency of Snitker that created this situation in the first place. Right now, the Atlanta Braves are an interesting baseball team for all of the wrong reasons. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.